Hi, everyone. We got the after lunch. We got the tough after lunch session. So I'm Tony Pipa, Senior Fellow in the Center for Sustainable Development at the Brookings Institution. Before I go into talking about the commission, we're going to do a bunch of group activity today. So rather than just try to corral everybody to the front, I do want to make sure that you're at a table with other folks, because you are going to do, you're both going to do some writing and some capturing on flip chart paper, but also have discussion amongst yourselves. So you want to have neighbors to have discussions with. So just keep that in mind. And you can move tables at any time. You can get up, move around. But let me actually start, first of all, by thanking all of you for being here and to be part of this. We're going to try to do a lot in a little bit of time. And for me also, just to talk a little bit about the America's Rural Future Commission, which the activity that we're going to do is actually prepared as an input for. So let me see here. Okay. All right. So as I explained this morning, for some of you who were in the breakout session earlier, I run an initiative at Brookings that's focused on the effectiveness, the extent to which federal policy effectively supports rural communities in their community economic development at the local level. I do a bunch of different things as part of that initiative. Again, shameless promotion, Reimagine Rural podcast is one of those work streams where I document positive change happening in rural communities across the country by capturing the stories and speaking to the local protagonists who are making that change happen. And we actually explore whether policy is helping or hurting. I do a lot of analytical work that focuses on the extent to which federal policy decisions affect local communities either negatively or positively, and the extent to which federal resources that are meant to be available to rural communities actually get to the communities that could maximize their benefit and how well they reflect the realities of the communities that they're meant to serve. I have a philanthropic background, so I'm also facilitating a community of practice amongst senior executives from place-based foundations that are serving primarily rural places from across the country. And you'll see some publications on that coming up later this year. It's interestingly, they're from wildly diverse places, and they have their diverse strategies because they're also serving very distinct geographies, but there's a lot of common themes that run across the ways in which they're trying to invest in those communities for economic mobility and well-being. And then the fourth work stream that we have is this commission, which is a joint partnership between the Brookings Institution and the American Enterprise Institute. So it's a bipartisan commission. It seeks to be very politically diverse. And it is basically doing, I would say, two different things. One, it's undertaking a review, sort of a formal review of federal policy and the extent to which it's serving rural places well. And it is going to issue what I am humbly calling a national rural strategy in the fall of next year, so in the fall of 2027. This is at a time at which there will be candidates starting to run for president, campaigns starting, primary campaigns starting. It will also be a time when key congressional, Senate, and House of Representative races, campaigning and primaries will be getting underway. The commission is co-chaired by the former senator from North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, and former governor of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu. And it's comprised of 18 members from, I would say, across all different sectors of American leadership. We've got a university president, we have a couple of folks from major philanthropies, a person who's running an initiative on rural pastors and faith-based organizations. We have a retired Air Force general, four-star general. We have folks who are working on the ground in community development finance institutions. We've got Wall Street, we've got Silicon Valley. So we tried to really draw in people from a vast array of leadership positions from across the country. I would say about half of them are very familiar with rural places. Heidi Heitkamp grew up in a town of 80 people. She has a lot of siblings, as I do. I grew up in north central Pennsylvania. I've got 6 siblings. She, I think, has one more than I do. So she jokes that her family made up 10% of her town's population. But we also have, I would say, about half of the commissioners really don't know rural, or they're not thinking as hard about rural as they ought to be, given that the sector that they're coming from. So for example, it was very strategic that we wanted to make sure we had folks from Wall Street, that we had folks from Silicon Valley, and we want to be able to use those networks and get into those networks to bring attention to both the opportunities and the challenges that rural places face, and how important rural places are to the country overall as well. So the way in which we're going about our work, and we launched the commission last summer, we have a public event. You can find the public event, and you can find a lot of the information that I'm talking about at our website. There's an America's Rural Future website, and you can find a recording of our launch event, which was Heidi and Chris in conversation with Chris Steyerwalt, who's a member of the commission. He is an AEI fellow who formerly worked at Fox News, actually made the call for Arizona for Biden, and then found himself not working for Fox News in a few months hence. But we don't have any current elected officials on the commission. So there's no current House of Representatives or senators or state officials. But we do have a lot of people with a lot of policy experience, both from the executive branch or formerly serving as an elected official in the House or the Senate or in their state. We have a former lieutenant governor, for example, former Secretary of Health of Alaska, those kinds of things. We are doing our work in 3 different ways. One is by doing a set of formal official visits by the commission to places across rural America. We felt like it was really important that we didn't do the commission's deliberations in Washington, D.C., but that we hear directly from rural people, local leaders, whether they be elected or have informal authority or are just working on behalf of their communities. Every time we do an official visit, we are also doing a public event, and you can find the videos of those past public events that are sort of a cross between a congressional testimony, where we'll have a panel of experts start off with remarks and then engage in back and forth on a set of questions and themes with commission members. And then it's kind of part town hall, because we bring in the audience and people both get to comment and ask questions of the commission. But that public event is actually one thing that happens in about 2 days' worth of meeting, site visit, conversations just directly with local leaders who are working in their particular communities and what their experiences are in their communities, what's hard, what's working, what the federal government should be working towards, what state government, what philanthropy, all those kinds of things, all those issues come up. So it really becomes a jam-packed 1.5 to 2 days. For example, we were in the Mississippi Delta. We started in Jackson. Our dinner in Jackson that night, we had former USDA Secretary Mike Espy, who was the first African-American congressionally elected representative since Reconstruction in Mississippi. Then we got on the bus. We went from Jackson to Yazoo City, Itabena, Indianola, Leland, Lambert, and I'm missing a place in there. And we did all of that in a day and a half. So we made stops. We engaged with people in their particular community. We heard about education, we heard about healthcare, we heard about Main Street development, we heard about the role that faith institutions play. We tried to hit the gamut. We've been in eastern Kentucky, in Appalachia as well. We've been in North Dakota. We've been on the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota. We have a few more of those official visits to come through the fall and the spring of next year. We are also doing what think tanks do. We are doing symposia, research symposia, where at the table we've got people who are doing research on particular issues that we think are really important for the future of rural communities, so that we get a sense of what the latest of the data and interventions are telling us, and how we ought to be thinking about that over the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and how policy could better support where we want things to go positively and where we want to mitigate the risks and what could be potentially negative. And then we're doing what we call consultations like this. So we're about to fit into an hour what we would typically kind of do as an input in 2 days with a whole bunch of different site visits and direct conversations with people. But we want to get as much input as possible from across people who are familiar with rural places, who are working in their rural places, and we want to be able to capture that, and we want to be a voice for that. We want to elevate the voice that's happening in rural communities across the country. Polling is quite clear. And my own experience in going to rural communities is quite clear. No matter what people says about rural people having sort of outsized impact on our politics, rural people feel, and with good reason, and I could point to a lot of different policy decisions that are made that have negatively affected rural places, rural people feel as if their realities really aren't at the table as policy decisions get made, and that they really don't feel as if they are part of the policy dialogue that sort of informs what kinds of decisions get made in Washington, D.C. So the commission is a way for us to at least do our little part to change that. And we do have people like Sununu and Heitkamp, who are frankly on TV way more than I am, which is never. And they have networks and relationships that are far above my pay grade that are going to be really important for what the future of our country looks like and what the future of rural America looks like. So again, just to let you know that what we're aiming toward is a final product in the fall of next year. It will not meet all of your expectations. It will be pretty short because nobody's going to read a 120-page report except for me and a couple of others. But while the report itself is short, we likely will on our website have a lot of deep dives into particular issue areas and policy issues related to those issue areas. And we are also capturing a lot of multimedia, so you will also see a lot of people's voices and people's direct engagement in the process. So before I go forward, any questions just about the commission, what we're about, what we're attempting to do? Am I crazy? You can say yes, because my travel schedule makes me feel like it sometimes, because of all the places that we're going to. And in addition to like consultation that we'll do here, I've done one, for example, in Minnesota. I'll do another in Minnesota at a major conference there. We're going to go to California. We're going to go to Alaska. We'll be doing something similar like this in West Virginia and other parts across the country as well. We'll slow all of that down next spring and then start to really drive toward what our final product will look like. But I guess one thing that I would ask of all of you, just stay up to date and think about how you can leverage actually what's also coming out of the commission. We are posting summaries of our symposia and our site visits. We are also going to marry that with some policy briefs on particular issues. I'm working on a piece on data centers right now, actually. And I have one forthcoming on the extent to which FEMA is really a rural development agency, because most of the entities, the majority of the entities that FEMA actually deals with are rural governments versus other size governments. So what I'd like to have you do, and you should have flip chart paper, you should have large sheets of paper, but also sticky notes at your tables. Does everybody have sticky notes? You can devise those up as well. But we've got a set of questions. Oh, I didn't even go forward on my, so here's our site visits. This is our calendar as we have it coming up. We are doing a global visit. There are other countries that have actually created national rural strategies and tried to implement them. So we want to hear directly from those other countries about what's been hard, what's been successful about that, what should we be keeping in mind. And as I said, we're doing a series of symposia. This is the kind of pillars that are guiding the issue areas that we're looking at for those symposia. We've done a symposium on new methods of economic development, locally led methods of economic development in rural places, on the rural healthcare infrastructure, rural hospitals, rural workforce, and the pressures that they're under. We did one on data centers, actually, as industrial development. Is it good or bad for rural places? We're going to be doing one in a week on healthcare outcomes and the disparities of healthcare outcomes. Next ones after that will be around disasters and climate change, natural resource management. We'll be doing a lot on workforce and the changing demographics, and even AI and where that might intersect for the future of the rural workforce. And then really the relationship between federal, state, and local. We'll have to do probably 2 on that, or we might do an all-day in-person session on that, where we're bringing together experts around all these issues. But the overarching focus is really, how should we be thinking, how are rural places going to thrive in the 21st century in the kind of economy and social dynamics that we have now? And to what extent should rural policy change to be able to support that so that it's as positive as possible? I will say from the analysis that I've done on, we don't really have a federal rural policy right now. We've got a bunch of programs. We've got 400 to 500 programs, actually, which are really hard to navigate and take advantage of. Most of the authorizing legislation that actually developed those programs was decades or maybe even a century or plus ago. A lot of it was for when rural was primarily an agrarian economy, and agriculture makes up about 7% of employment in rural places, aggregate employment in rural places now. So there's a lot that can be improved. There's a lot that I think we can do. So what I'd like you to do now is give us some input. And from the place that you sit, the work that you're doing, whatever you're doing in a rural community, whether it's professional or volunteer, whether it's formal or informal, I've got a set of questions that I'd like some feedback on. Now, the first one is, when you think about what you're doing in your particular community, where are federal policies most consequential? Now, some of those might be on something like healthcare. I think even in the breakout session that we had this morning, someone said, look, we need universal healthcare. That's not a particularly rural issue. That's an issue that even goes beyond rural. Happy for you to mark that down, because we do want to get a sense of where we think the big issues are. But I would also ask you to say things that are, especially federal policy, that are especially focused on rural. Anything from broadband, economic development, education, to healthcare, to any of that. I would love for you to take a few moments, take a sticky note, and write down 2 or 3 things that you think are really important and consequential for your own work. You can do this in silence. And or if you think there's a place where federal policy ought to be consequential but is not right now, that is also fair game. Is there something the federal government ought to be doing that it isn't doing right now, would also be fair game. Try to limit yourself to to 3 sticky notes per person. I write really small, so I would get about 10 things onto that, and that's fair if you want to do that. But take a few moments to think about that, write them down, put the sticky notes then on your flip chart paper. I am actually going to take these with me, so try to make it somewhat legible. But it will also be, I think, grist for a conversation amongst your table, because I want to see also if there are areas of agreement or disagreement at the table after you've taken a couple of minutes to write these down. So let's go get to work. Yes? Following publication of the strategy, what would success look like? Success would look like a lot of those policy recommendations actually making it to become policy at some point. I have no illusions that that will happen immediately. I have experience on the international development side. There was a commission that was actually congressionally mandated in the middle 2000s that came out with a set of recommendations, and it was vehemently bipartisan, same amount of members on each side of the aisle. But if you look at the trajectory of foreign assistance and major reforms and changes that were made to foreign assistance over the following 15 years, you would find a lot of those changes actually in those particular recommendations. People went from that commission to serve in administrations. People worked through different networks to create advocacy around some of those ideas. I would say in the immediate, especially given when the report is coming out, if there are questions in the candidate debates that are specific to rural America, that is a win, because I challenge any of you to find a debate or look at the President's States of the Union addresses over several years, see if you can even find the word rural in it. So if we are upping the discourse, both among the media and among the politicians themselves, about having to grapple with what they are saying is going to affect rural communities, I think we've created some momentum, and I would count that as a win as well. And everyone else can be happily writing as I was answering that question. So where are the points in which your work intersects with federal policy and it's having the most impact, whether in a positive or a negative sense? And also fair game is what's missing that you think the federal government ought to be thinking about? I'll give you another minute or so. And then as you finish writing, you can start to share those with folks at your table as well. So as you finished writing, you can bring your head up and then start to see who's finished at your table. But get them onto the big sheet of paper and just put number 1 on that particular paper as well, so I know it's for the first question. All right, as everyone's finished writing, start to share amongst each other what you came up with and a little bit on why. And then see how it resonates with those at your table as well. Okay, man. I wish I could be at all these tables. I have a feeling that there's a lot being put on the table here. So I know we're a big crowd. We'll do the best we can, but I would like to hear some reflections from folks who are willing to share, given the conversation that you had at your table. Anyone want to share something that really they thought was very important coming out of that conversation, or even areas in which the table itself might have really come to some agreement around some important issues? Who's willing to share? We've got a mic that will go to where you are. Come on, don't be shy. There we go. We've got a table right here. Just if you can introduce yourself when you speak, that'd be great.
Yeah, leave it to the guy not from Vermont. I'm Chris Cassie. I'm with Savas Learning, and I'm actually from Virginia. We really focused around education outcomes. One of the elements is the concern for rural communities, especially when you look at the changing educational outcome perspectives with the shift from the Department of Education to the Department of Labor. The accountability for employment and longitudinal data on wages works well in a place that has rich, robust talent pipeline, but in rural communities, they may educate somebody or a cohort of 10 people for one role that's available in the community. So they can't meet the outcomes that the Department of Labor is going to expect that someone, say, in Worcester, Massachusetts, may just crush. So that they're already at a disadvantage because of the talent pipeline and the labor and the talent pipeline that's been developed for their employers. I selfishly, since I have the mic, on the other side, or similar, look at the fact that multiple states have said they're moving to skills-based hiring. The fact is they haven't. That's a lie. They have not rewritten their job descriptions. Nobody's employing industrial organizational psychologists to rewrite the job descriptions. Folks in rural communities have many talents and abilities that are not necessarily represented by University of Vermont bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. If job descriptions can be funded and the University of Vermont's industrial organizational psychologists can rewrite all the job descriptions, then folks in the community can be properly trained, skill gaps can be identified, therefore attracting more industry to rural Vermont because economic developers can actually quantify the talents that exist and folks can write job descriptions that can actually be filled by the talent in the community.
Yeah, thank you. So educational outcomes and actually just even some simple changes that DOL might be able to make in terms of its data collection and data publication. There's a good start. Who else would like to share? Braden? All the way over the other side. We're going to, Emma, we're going to keep you in shape.
So we talked about a lot of different stuff, but one of the pretty consistent themes was the way that federal dollars that go into municipalities have changed after the passing of the Big Beautiful Bill. So rural states and towns specifically relied a lot on federal funds just to upkeep their basic public services because those things cost a lot of money and you don't have a lot of taxes. And after the Big Beautiful Bill was passed, you have billions of dollars in funding that have suddenly been lost in towns. And there are billions of dollars in budget shortfalls that little town governments have to figure out how to deal with. And that means you have people fighting over whether or not they want to pay a few extra $1,000 in taxes or close all of the fire stations and police stations in your town of I don't know how many, like a really small population. And this also leads to things where you lose direct aid services that rural people rely on more so, like Medicare and Medicaid and SNAP benefits. So yeah, funding.
Great, thank you. Who else was having a conversation about HR 1 implementation, impacts on Medicaid, SNAP, Rural Health Transformation Program? Just show of hands, put them up high. All right, we had some of that. Who else had conversation around sort of federal funds not getting to local communities in the way in which they need those monies to get to local communities? All right, and what are some of the pain points? Anybody want to talk about some of the pain points of those federal funds actually not getting to the ground, not getting to the local communities in a way in which they could use or need it? I've got someone over there. I've got to take her, Emma.
Funding for some agriculture projects, the decisions are very delayed, and that means that we might miss a whole season of doing the research that we wanted to do. So that's a huge impact.
Yeah, that's helpful. Anybody talk about, we've got someone over there, go ahead.
We both do work at this table with NRCS programs, USDA programs, EQIP, CSP, REAP, was it? Yeah. And we found that payment rates have been decreasing and practices are shifting in a way that does not favor our like local farmers' interests, and they rely on that money for infrastructure upgrades and a number of things.
Yeah, really helpful.
Thanks. We were talking about just how federal grants are structured to require they're reimbursement based, and so if you are in a small rural community, you may not have the capital in the first place in order to handle reimbursement, or you may not have the physical staff infrastructure for processing those grants. What else did we talk about? Oh, matches, required matching
Shocking.
funds.
Match requirements came up.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
So. Oh, and one other thing, actually, if you're not aware of the changes that are happening to OMB right now, it's really critical that you submit comments on that.
Yes, there's an open comment period to mid-July for changes that OMB is suggesting to be made to just basically general grant guidelines.
Good acronyms, just in case folks are not familiar with them in the room.
OMB is the Office of Management and Budget, and so is a White House office that sets standards and rules that go across the entire federal government. So USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or the Environmental Protection Agency, all of those agencies that run programs actually have to follow guidance that is put out by the Office of Management and Budget.
And if you want to learn more, go to the National Council of Nonprofits webpage, and they have a brief that they put out about it.
Yep, that's outside of the commission's purview, because that's happening a lot quicker than our work. But that is an issue that's right now underway. I saw a hand over here.
Thank you. So first of all, I listened to Reimagine Rural, the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And I just put two and two together as I sat here in this ballroom, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know this guy. So I listened to your podcast on the way into my office when I go to work. And
All right, wonderful.
I don't even get time. I'm going to give you more than that. Even I gave the information to our Economic Development Commission. I'm a staff rep for them, and said, you guys got to listen to this podcast. So there you go. Now I'll be able to say, look at this. Right. I was here. We had the same conversation exactly about match being an issue. You know, if you have a $300,000 grant and you've got, you know, a $30,000 match or whatever it is, just give them the $270 or whatever it happens to be. It's hard for towns to come up with that, or to justify it, or have to go to bond, or to do all these other things when they have to make other really important decisions about where to cut money. Funding for transportation is a huge thing that we're all missing, and it's that's, I think, causing a lot of havoc in Essex, where I work. And we're losing our GMT there. So that's I know there's other municipalities that are dealing with that as well. And for Essex, where I work, also, we have a population of 11,000, probably closer to 12,000 people. I keep looking at grants, and we're automatically disqualified because of our population numbers. And it doesn't mean that we're any less rural. We're really big in square footage, and we have some pretty remote places, and we could benefit from some of these grants. But rural communities are not apples to apples. Would be my thing. I think we are, what makes us rural can be different.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So let's change the conversation. Go back to your sticky notes. If you had the power to wave a magic wand, what would be the improvement or the recommendation that you would get and want to put in front of whether it's your legislator or someone who's in the executive branch, an administration official? It says, if you did this thing or these two things or these three things, life in the rural place in which I live could be so much better. So let's take a little bit of time, write down what's working, what you would change to make work even better, and start developing a solution set onto your flip chart paper as well. Okay. Let's hear some of those ideas that you've been sharing within your group and at your table. Who wants to put a few ideas on the table? Who will get us started? And I see all of you in the back too. You guys don't get an easy pass just because you're far away. So we've got a hand up, oh, we've got a hand there, and then we've got a hand there as well, Emma.
Okay. Is it on? Yes?
Yes.
It is. If I could wave a magic wand, I would like the federal government and rural communities themselves to lift up a narrative that's asset-based rather than deficit-based. That's all I want.
All right. So I actually, in response to the gentleman's question here about also if we are successful with the commission, I think that's also another measure. Whether major media and even policymakers in Washington start to talk about rural places as places of opportunity, as places of assets, as places of innovation and creativity, rather than as places that need saving or are left behind or in other shape or form, however that narrative exists and seems to dominate sometimes the conversations that we have. So I love that, but then how's the federal government going to do that? Oh, I have no idea. Ah! All right. All right, we've got ideas here.
So I'm sitting with a little cluster of pediatricians, future pediatricians. So we said to fully fund rural healthcare, really invest in rural healthcare, not only for the obvious reasons that people deserve, I think have a right to live a healthy life, but also because a healthy population is really the foundation of a productive workforce, a thriving economy, and really sets people up to live their best lives, which is what I think we all want.
So let me ask what it would mean to fully fund rural healthcare, though, because I think one of the questions will be that we're going to have to struggle with as a country, actually, is what's the expectation for what gets delivered locally and what can be delivered sort of further away. And I don't think we're having that conversation now. I think we're all probably very concerned about the healthcare infrastructure that's going away.
Do you mean like through telehealth? Is that what you're saying?
Well, telehealth or specialists that might be in an urban area rather than in a rural area. But I know like the rural hospital I was born in no longer exists. Like it closed down 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the answer to that other than I think it's a both and, but the other thing I wanted to say is in many communities, the hospital is the major employer too. So when rural hospitals close, we also lose a lot of jobs.
Yeah. And I think understanding both hospitals and schools as anchors, both economically and culturally, is really important.
And we also talked for both questions about federal predictability and that we can do just about anything, but we need to know what's available. And it can't be pulled out from under us periodically and then dropped back in. That predictability is essential.
That's a huge point. I love that. That's a great message for us to be carrying. And that also means legislative action often versus executive branch action because it can be more durable. Although, even in this day and age, that's a question mark. But, oh, thank you. Further back, I love it. Great. Thank you.
We were talking a lot about how small universities in rural places are sort of an anchor point of a community, and federal funding typically goes into a university in form of grants to help support it. If I had a magic wand, you wouldn't be allowed to just take away the grant because you didn't like the decision of the person before you, and or you don't like the words that are in the grant, or when you take office, just if your opinion does not match those that have awarded the grant, if it says awarded, that should be a promissory note to the person who was awarded the grant, and you shouldn't be allowed to just make it disappear.
Great, got it. So contractual obligations are contractual obligations. And it goes back to predictability, actually, and dependability of that particular money. But I think it's also a really important point, the extent to which even small liberal arts educational institutions or smaller schools are really important anchor also in rural communities. And many of those schools also aren't like major research institutions or things like that. And there might be ways in which we need to be thinking about those institutions and the role that they play on an ongoing basis in some of those communities. I know Vermont has been, especially a place where a lot of those communities and a lot of those institutions have felt under pressure. Are you on? Oh, we're not hearing you.
There we go. It may be a little simplistic or trite, but bring back manufacturing to this country. I know it's shouted from the rooftops, but it's not really happening. We've transitioned to a service economy, and we're not producing value like we used to. And you can do that in rural areas really well.
Yeah. So a focused industrial policy on bringing back manufacturing into small places. It might not be at the scale, like the factories might not be at the scale that they once were, but it doesn't mean that the jobs can't exist. Okay, there we go.
Hello, I'm Gia, and as a rising high school junior, I thought that we should emphasize youth entrepreneurship, especially because we are the next innovators for society, and I just feel as though creating success or creating a platform for us will help us in the future, as well as impacting society in a positive way. So,
awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you. And I will say a major theme out of the podcast is that rural places that are doing well and building really positive momentum often are finding ways to engage their youth, and not for that leadership at the local level, not to be always encapsulated by the same two people, as Sarah talked about when she was up here, but that it's being shared, and it's being shared intergenerationally, and that there are opportunities intergenerationally. I think I saw one. Let's take one more. Okay, there we go. One more.
Yeah, we talked a lot about at our table thinking about how do we center community voice and trust rural communities to make decisions for themselves, and how can we take this kind of massive federal funding space and funnel it down and get it to the hands of rural communities, and thought a little bit about maybe that's through, we see these rural development hubs or intermediaries, CDFIs, that can play that role of being able to take in capital and then get it to communities, but kind of have their ear to the ground on what's really needed and be connected to folks locally. So I think if I could wave a magic wand to think about really looking hard at what does a rural community need to be able to take funding in, and what can we do to better support that infrastructure and get those federal dollars on the ground.
That's wonderful. And I will say that that's a theme that we hear when we do these kinds of consultations and meetings. Not just the predictability, but also flexibility to be able to meet the needs that are hyper-local, because those folks, like one rural community, you've seen one rural community, so there's always a little bit of a difference there. But people at the local level are the ones who are in charge of their own development, and they also often have the solution set. And then strengthening the infrastructure in between where that capital resides, whether it's at the federal level or maybe even in other places, financial institutions or otherwise, that can be a place in which you can get that capital back down to the ground. One more, and I'll just ask you for a show of hands around this, because one of the things that we often hear also, and it's actually embedded in that solution, is that a lot of this really depends on local leadership, local collaboration, civic participation at the local level. Vermont is sort of just the way in which your governance is put together at the town level. It's really an exemplar of that. Could the federal government help that in some way? I'm thinking of, for example, a leadership development network that is rural. I mean, could you imagine having folks from rural communities in Vermont that are part of a network with folks from rural communities across the country, just as a peer network and as a cohort, to be able to both share and build relationships that are wider than their own local communities, but also to help create that narrative change that we even started off with. Because then it becomes more about people doing for themselves and communities actually applying the solutions at the local level. Does that sound like a good idea, or am I crazy? Show of hands. Good idea? All right. See, I'm already focus grouping solutions here. You have been wonderful, actually, especially with how large of a crowd we are, to be able to engage in this exercise. And I have no doubt that there are a ton of ideas and issues that you've laid out, and we are going to collect all of these. But I just want to thank you actually for participating in this, for being my Vermont consultation, or at least one of them. I won't say I won't be back and might not do this in other shape or forms as well. But thank you to the Leahy Institute for Partnerships for indulging this and for creating a space. And thank you to all of you for participating. I really appreciate it.